So, how about this new player's guide to gearing for and from operations? How long will I be postponing this? No longer. Greetings, I'm VULKK and welcome to this hopefully entertaining, useful and not too long improvised guide to gearing for operations valid for after patch 4.0. Obviously, if there are more alterations that BioWare is doing to our game, there would be eventually a new video or additions to this one. A few topics I've listed here in my script that I will be talking about throughout the video. The differences between raiding at 50 and 65, why I hate level 50 as a raiding level, and more on that later. What do we need to start doing operations, guild, pug runs and such? Priorities in gearing, item stats and tokens versus non-token gear. What items to aim for first? In other words, what first to pick when we get enough commendations? Because when you don't use commendations, the other option is to use tokens, and tokens only allow you to pick whatever the token item is. Using orange shells versus using non-moddable gear or using the original gear. Classes to play for the first time in an operation, especially when you don't know the mechanics and you are lazy to research them. Which operations to start first, because you know there are, forget me if I'm mistaken, 9. If you consider the fake operation to Boros Courtyard, that might be 10. That's a lot, and obviously not all of them are equally balanced. No, there are boringly easy ones and incredibly challenging ones. Is it easier to gear up with operations or with flashpoints? Which one should I prefer? And the last topic is, should you farm purple crystals? Purple crystals is the new version of purple commendations. There is no commendation in the game anymore, but we'll close those crystals. Shall we begin after this very long introduction? First of all, what is the difference between starting your raiding campaign at level 50 or anything between 50 and 65? As we know, Group Finder and Story Mode with the bolster allows people to start queuing up for operations and entering operations manual, as a matter of fact, from level 50. If you are a new player, I definitely don't recommend you that. If you are a new player on a new server but actually experienced player, that's totally fine. At level 50 you actually do have the bare minimum of abilities and skills required to complete whatever the operation is. Maybe minus 1 or 2 ops that are really challenging. These are the 2 latest ones, the Ravagers and Temple of Sacrifice. More on the order of the challenge from operations later on. At level 50, you're still missing a lot of passive and active abilities. If you take a very quick look, you will see that you don't have your full set of utility points yet. And even though utilities are really not that important for most classes, they might be actually vital for a boss fight here and a boss fight there, maybe even for some challenging trash pools. Oh yeah, there are some tough trash pools, and I'm actually remembering just now how much we wiped trying to underman 16 hard mode with 8 people, the trash in Eternity Vault between the first and the second boss. I know about the skipping. More experienced people will start telling me in the comments that you can skip those. I know. I just still don't have a confirmation if this is really considered a serious exploit or something in the gray area, and I prefer not to do it. I would advise you not to do it as well, even though it does make complete sense that stealth class should use advantage. If they give you stealth, you would be a fool not to use it. Anyway, enough on that. At level 50 you're also missing upgrades to active abilities and passives as well. If you take a look at the left side of the discipline window, you will see a few very important, especially the latest passive and active abilities, still missing now after the level cap has been raised to 65. BioWare did some rearrangements to the disciplines, and they moved some of the best abilities even further up, or depending how you look at it, maybe further down the line, the discipline path. If you're really that eager, you can definitely level up the last 15 levels only through operations, because in most of them not some, but most of them, the experience rewards for completing it, including the trash kills and the quests that you eventually may pick up or you don't pick up. It's not that really important. It's a one-time quest, that's the one I'm talking about. There is of course a wiki related to and attached to each one of the operations. Be careful and always pick the weekly quests that you're doing for the operation, because you get rewarded with crystals, if nothing else. At whatever level you are when you're starting operations, because that's who the video is aimed for, people who are starting operations for the first time, you need crystals. The gear coming from the crystals is crap, and I will tell you more details about that later on again in the video. But here now just a quick touch, it is crap. It is still an improvement compared to whatever you loot while questing on the planets and just doing your normal story arcs, but it is still crap raiding gear. At level 65 you should already feel comfortable, because not only you've played extra 15 levels, but you actually now have your absolute full set of abilities and utility points to do with them whatever you please. Plus, there is that awkward moment when, let's say you're a tank, level 50, you have no clue about the operation you're about to do, but you just queue up on the group finder, and because you are a tank, you would eventually get an instant or nearly instant pop on pretty much most of the servers. And then what happens? You're low level, you have no idea what to do as a tank, and you're surrounded by a whole bunch of other low levels who also have no clue what it is to be a raider or with any role in this operation. Then the wiping starts. It's not fun when people start wiping on easy content. I know that it doesn't seem easy to some of you guys, but once you finish it a couple of times, you will realize, and especially when you have a taste from the hard mode content and nightmare cycles after 4.2, you will see that the story mode content is really forgiving, very easy and absolutely not demanding. That's probably why BioWare allows people to start from 50, but I still don't approve of that. Who the hell am I to disapprove or approve? I'm just a player, but yes, player with an opinion. And my opinion is that operations and flashpoints should be available after 60, because 60 and 65 are much closer and there is not that much trouble. I do speak of first-hand experience here, because I've witnessed it once or twice attempting pugs after 4.0. I mean, regular pugs queuing as a healer, because queuing as a DPS is a dead end in most cases. I queued up as a healer, and I do remember a specific moment from the Ravagers, wiped 3 times on the first boss, where I, as a healer level 60 or 61, was doing more DPS than one of the level 50 or 51 DPS guys. Yep, that's what experience means. It's not just a low level with the experience. And believe me when I tell you, most of the people starting operations at level 50 are new players. That's not a good idea, guys. If you are a new player, please don't queue up as soon as you are available. That actually is valid for PvP as well. Queuing up at level 10 may be fun if you're surrounded by other level 10s, but if you happen to be on your team with 5 level 10s against 5 level 28 and 29s. Yes, I know that the teams are 8 versus 8, but the rest we leave to be varying numbers. That's not a fun and competitive match you're about to face. Moving on to the next topic. What do you need to start doing operations? Guilds versus pug runs. Obviously, when you're doing pug runs, there are 2 types. First, you queue up directly from Group Finder, which actually rarely happens, if ever. I don't do it personally since, well, these 1 or 2 attempts I've mentioned earlier. If you have a guild, it's the perfect opportunity to start operations, especially if your guild is already doing them and has experience. They can bring you through the content, they can explain to you the tactics. Even better if you have access to any kind of audio chat and audio connection for much easier communication. If you're doing pugs, everything will have to be explained via typing in the chat, and again, from personal experience, most people tend to not pay attention to what is being written, and then they miss who am I going for, where do I stand, what's my role, and when you start repeating these things over and over again for each boss encounter, it gets frustrating. You don't need absolutely nothing except the name of your character and your character being as high a level as humanly possible until your nerves actually hold and you lose totally all of your patience and start queuing up. That's what I mean. You don't need gear, you don't even need utilities. I've proven to myself, yes, I do have experience because I've done all the operations many times through the 4 years of existence, but it is totally possible to do them with every single class without using utilities. Yes, utilities are awesome and they give you variations, but they come in play in something more challenging like hard mode or of course nightmare. Don't bother about the gear, you can even bring naked character and the bolster system will just do its job. Please don't bring a naked character. God knows how many bugs are about to be discovered if everybody starts doing this. But you can seriously just pick up any green, blue or purple or whatever it is cheapest to you, equip it so that your character looks fun and interesting and just queue up for an operation. Or sit on the fleet and wait for those kind of preformed pugs. People are looking for different various roles when forming an operation a lot on the Republic and Empire fleet. And once the group is full, then they attempt to do the group finder daily. What would be the priorities in gearing? Let's do a little bit of a talk about stats and tokens versus non-token gear. First, the priorities in gearing is related to the stats. For all DPS classes, it is important to start with 110% accuracy. You gain 110 by any means necessary. If you read or hear or see somewhere someone suggesting that you need this number of augments or this number of implants and this number of enhancements, this is their complete build and it's their own. There is a specific number or percentage, if it's easier for you, that you need to aim for. As soon as you reach that, you don't care how you reached it. You could have used any number of any possible mods and armor parts that are accessible to you at this very moment. You're not aiming to do the perfect build from the very beginning. You're aiming the stats according to their priority, and the priority goes for DPS as follows: accuracy, then crit. Accuracy is going to be 110% or as close as possible below that. Going above is totally pointless. Don't do it if you can. And then follows crit. For most DPS classes, the advised crit rating is anywhere between 35 and 39. That obviously depends on the gear. Don't attempt to do 208 gear and reach 38-39% crit, because in this case your other stats would suffer a lot. And after that comes alacrity. Alacrity is really important now after the changes made to crit, but I've talked about that in detail and much more length in a different video. If I don't forget, I will link it here somewhere so you can check it out. Alacrity is the third priority spec for DPS, and you can stack it pretty much as high as you want. There is no really any hard cap or any kind of a noticeable serious cap on alacrity. You could put the rest of your enhancements and augments on alacrity after you finished with accuracy and critical. There is no point doing augments with main stat because that's not really beneficial anymore for DPS. For healers, the things stay a little bit different. They don't require accuracy, which means you start building crit and alacrity. So you have a lot more armor slots and mod slots available to build a lot higher critical and alacrity. For tanks, unfortunately, I fail here because I don't play a tank. You probably know that I used to play a tank up until, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of 2012. And since then, I don't play tanks in the game anymore. What is the gearing and priority system for tanks? Unfortunately, I cannot tell you. My apologies about that. I would be extremely grateful and thankful if someone with tank experience posts a few notes in the comment section down below. Token versus non-token gear. Depending on what you currently have on your character, every single item that brings you +1, +2 on this or that stat is an upgrade. It doesn't matter if it comes from a token or a non-token item. Obviously the stats on the non-token items are the bad versions. The armorings are always the same, but the non-token items do not have attached to the armorings any set piece bonus. The token items do have. The non-token items have a bad stat selection on the mod and the enhancement, but it doesn't mean that you should directly vendor it or straight away throw it away. You should just consider where you might use it depending on what you currently have on your character. Non-token gear is useful until and before you get access to the token gear. As I've mentioned, that really doesn't play too much. Doesn't have too much of a bigger effect because story mode operations are bolstered. Same goes for the flashpoints, but flashpoints are actually kind of a step before or a step lower than operations, so I probably shouldn't mention them anymore. And the next topic follows: what items to aim for first. Now, this is obviously only an option when you have more than one character. If you just have one, you aim for everything. If you have multiple characters, I would advise you for your main, when you're doing pugs especially, or even guild runs depending on the organization of the guild raids, first go for the non-tradable items. By non-tradable I mean the ones that aren't bound to legacy and you cannot transfer them, which is primarily the left side of your gear. It is important because these things do affect a lot your healing abilities and your DPS abilities. And again, I cannot comment much about tanks because I don't know in details their stat priority. But I'm almost certain that it also plays a very big role for the tanks. The right side of the character gear is transferable, the weapons as well. If you don't know how and when, take a look at the various reputation vendors, especially the Thorn ones. They offer absolutely all variations of offhands for all classes and quite cheap. And now the event is monthly, correct me if I'm mistaken. I haven't done it since, I don't know, 2-3 years since the first one. So I don't really follow anymore what happens to the Grey on Ilum. Because of the transferring things, the next topic is about orange shells. I would recommend you always to use orange shells with legacy bound status. This way you can transfer the same gear to your other characters, especially when you're doing story mode. I know that I mentioned a few times you get bolstered, but having better gear than what the game bolsters you to is actually beneficial because it still bolsters the items that are falling below the threshold, but the items that are above the threshold of the bolster bug are giving you even extra benefits for DPS gear or survival as a tank. Regarding classes to bring for operation for the first time, if you're wondering if you have 2 or 3 characters and you don't know which one to bring first to an operation, I think the rule number 1 should have to be just play the class you enjoy the most. I know that some guilds will tell you that we need this role and we need that role and this one is better than the other one. No, play the class that you want. Story mode operations are really welcoming absolutely every class and any class balance within the group of 8 or 16. Starting as a DPS would probably be a good idea because it's kind of straightforward and you always do DPS. Yes, in some cases healer role might be easier because the healers always do exactly the same in every boss encounter in any operation. For the DPS there are a little bit of extra mechanics here and there, and obviously the toughest and the hardest and more challenging role is the tanks one. I would absolutely not recommend you play as a tank in a new operation or even a new flashpoint if you haven't at least read a guide, seen a video, or maybe if not something else, then at least ask a couple of questions when you form the pug and you see someone more experienced there. I'm sure that if you ask politely, there will be plenty of people with a lot of enthusiasm to help you and guide you through the encounter. The game is not full of trolls, as many tend to believe. I don't know why. It's all about being polite and asking the right way and the right people. There might be a specific order of operations that people would suggest new players to go through. And even though they are not really set into strict categories, I would definitely tell you that, for example, the oldest operations that exist in the game since 2011, Eternity Vault and Karagas Palace, are absolutely by far the easiest ones. And it's very likely that the challenging scale follows the release cycle. The next ones would be De Nova, TFB, Scum and Villainy, followed by the Dreadmasters duo, which is Dread Fortress and Dread Palace, and at the end comes the Ravagers and Temple of Sacrifice. EV and KP are definitely the easiest ones and the shortest ones, mind you. Whereas the Ravagers and Temple of Sacrifice are by far the toughest one. Yes, that implies even for story mode, and yes, again, the challenge, the level of challenge is not as big and is not as different as it is in hard mode. In hard mode, the tough moment in EV, the toughest moment in EV is really the trash pulls after the first and before the second boss. Yes, believe me, that really is the most challenging part, especially for healers, because those nasty stupid DPS always rush first. And one of the longest operations would probably be Scum and Villainy, not because it's so unique or has something extremely challenging and different and unique, mostly because it really has 7 boss encounters, and each boss being between 3, 5, 6 minutes, the final one being 12 to 8 to 10. That really consumes time. The next topic, which is actually second from the last, is it easier to gear up with operations or flashpoints? If you enjoy doing the flashpoints, especially if you have friends, because for some reason the 4-man flashpoints are really unbeatable for some pug runs. I don't know why that happens, probably because the tactical mode is a bad idea and I never liked that idea. Having 4 guardians doing DPS at the same time and nobody healing, and you have to run for heal to the nearest call-to station. No, that's not a good idea. That's not how you're being taught to obey and follow team play and learn about the team play. Definitely start with operations, especially if you've done the flashpoints for the story once or twice, just to experience what happens inside. Start with operations, do not be afraid, pugs are not that bad. The very last topic I have selected here in my script is about the purple crystals. You need all kinds of crystals, especially in the very beginning when you're making your absolutely first steps. Remember that the bolster bug, every time I call it the bug, apologies, it's actually bolster bug buff, damn it. The bolster buff is bringing your character somewhere around the level of unbalanced 216 raid gear. I've never made any exact calculations, but judging by what I remember being bolstered as soon as I was level 65 in the first operations runs, when I was still running my level 60 gear, that's kind of the border where the game brings you up to speed with 2016 unbalanced raid gear. Check the fleet vendors often, pretty much all the time actually, and try to memorize what pieces you need, what stats you need. Do those calculations in your mind from time to time and don't leave everything on chance. It's not a good idea to start with low accuracy, so again, once and for the last time, pay attention to your accuracy as a DPS. It's really important, even for story modes. If you have low accuracy, you may build up 43-45% of critical and God forbid 15% alacrity. You're still missing a lot and you're skimping on DPS. That's it. I hope this long video was useful to you. And if you still have any other questions, please feel free to ask. I might have come up with a few more topics to cover, but hey, we don't want to sit here for an hour, do we? Thank you guys for enjoying it. If you reached the end, you definitely enjoyed it. I know that by experience already. See you with the next one. Bye bye.